Good evening and welcome everyone to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective and the premier program in the world to bring you spiritual advice for your everyday life based on taking news topics from the day, unfolding them, lifting our perspective, and looking at the spiritual principles that are at play. Before we get started tonight, already now, down below, like tonight's episode and share it with fellow spiritual seekers, family, and friends. And follow us here on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at ikya.official. Now, last week we dug deep into the embroiling conflict in Israel and Palestine. So we thought this week we would dive into a loosely related topic because as this conflict is unfolding, we see the human need for an external framework of guiding our lives at work, where we use religion and dogma to both guide us in living a good life and also to justify some of the most atrocious behavior that humans are capable of. So we thought it would be really important and good to dig into that sort of underlying human habit and pattern that we have. So that's the question that we put to us tonight is, do you need religion? Do you need Jesus or Allah or Buddha to help you live a good life? Or do you use religion to do the opposite, to justify horrible actions? This is the question that we wonder tonight, and we'll dig into everything around it. So, IKYA, let's get started by sort of asking that question. Do humans need religion?
Well, what I often think about is why are people in the alternative field such a mess? Right? When you look at the alternative group and when you look at people in religion, there is an interesting distinction. Now, all surveys and all signs shows that religious people will define themselves as happier, more balanced, healthier than other people. They also are more successful. They often earn more money. They're more engaged in their communities. They're more successful relationships. They take more responsibility in their communities, and they experience more purpose. On the other hand, when you look at the alternative group, we often see that people are messy. They live messy lives, no aim. They're not productive. They don't have good relationships. Like it's all of that. So why is that? Right? Shouldn't we, when we move away from religion and begin to find our own path, should we not be more productive? Should we not be more happy? Should we not have a stronger ethical backbone? Right? So what is this? So the interesting thing about the human life form is that it's deeply religious. And this is why it becomes so difficult. Because when we look at our genetics, and we look at human evolution, religion is part of our brain. And how explained it is, when you make your mental maps, when you try to understand the world, because you have to understand the world in some way in order to survive, right? So you write your different maps and you try to figure out how things work and then how to be successful in it. Right? It means that you will have certain points, you will understand certain things because you rely on your personal experience, which means most things in life you have not experienced and you don't understand. You may have seen it, you haven't touched it, you haven't interacted with it, right? So how the religious brain works is simply making assessments about things you don't know, but things you start believing about other things to fill in the gaps. So you know that this is there and this is there, and then you say, okay, most likely there is something in between here, right? And then you can, based on our experience, you can fill in the gaps because you have to, because you may have to interact with it, and then you will use your experience. That's basically what the religious brain is, and every animal, every life form with a brain has religious programmings, right? And you can see it. There have been so many tests with animals and birds and even fish where they can, you know, for instance, you know, they will have a toy, and when they make it squeak, they will get snacky, right? And because they like it, they will immediately create the assumption that they are connected. So then we'll establish a religious practice of, you know, whenever you squeak that toy, you expect to get a snack. Even when it doesn't happen, they may spend the rest of their lives trying to make that toy squeak because they remember that a snacky is involved here. So it's how the brain connects different elements, right, and draw conclusions that are not evident, but based on assumptions, based on how you think things should work. And this is why it's belief, right? And throughout history, when you look at human evolution, right, people who believed and were better at it, they survived because they made better assessments about the world around them. So being daring and kind of trust your beliefs would make you go places that other people would not, right? Because you thought you understood how things work. So that has been a very successful strategy. So the religious brain, the religious genetics are part of us all. So therefore it's ingrained in our sense of survival and our survival strategies. Because when we started developing tribes, believing the same things are important. We need to relate to the same understanding about what foods to eat, what to avoid, who our enemies are, where to find water, like, you know, all these things, because we need to have an understanding of how the world works in order to work together, right? Because cooperation has been the key for human survival. And to cooperate, you need to belong to the same machine, meaning you need to have the same understanding of reality and what type of priority and values you operate by. And that is religion. And then over time, we developed different forms of organized religion as an extension, right? Because when we become bigger groups, then we have the need to make sure that everybody believes the same thing, right? And then we developed our different gods. So we can place authority that is eternal and provides a certain sense of continuum, because you may have different leaders, right? Remember that in a tribe, way back then, we may have lived for 20 to 30 years, right? So you would have a certain turnover of people, right? So having a God that was eternal, because most tribes, most types of religions humans have invented, has always been that God that is eternal. It creates the sense of belonging to the same space, the same authority, the same rules, the same continuum, and leaders and people can come and go, but it stays the same. That has been an important factor in human survival. So there are so many positives when it comes to religion as an extension of how we organize ourselves. I see religions as that, first and foremost. Spiritually, they're not very advanced. And they don't have to be. Because they belong to a certain level of consciousness. Now, when we look at our own evolution as individuals spiritually, and also as a life form, we always begin in a collective. All life forms operate in groups normally. And it's because we can learn from each other. And how humans have survived is specialization and organization and collaboration, meaning that when you were good at something, you would do that. Someone else could be good at something completely different, meaning that you would kind of spread your talents and you would have people being experts in what they did. And that ensures survival. So we are hardwired to be in a group, to belong to a tribe, because that's safety. It is also how we learn. When we think of our whole path as spiritual beings, when we look at the human journey, starting as an infant and as a child, you can see the same type of pattern. You need to learn first, and how you do that is through your group, from other people. And I often compare this to how artists develop as well. You start by copying. You start by copying technique. You start by copying everything. As humans, you even copy, the way you speak, body language, everything, the way you think. It belongs to the same template. And that is how you learn to be a human. It's how you learn to be an artist, is by copying the works of other artists and learning their technique. At some point, you've learned how to function or how to do something, and then you're triggered into finding your own path, finding your own version. This is often also the case in the world of art, where you see an artist in his or her earlier years copying and just following whatever they've learned. And then after a few years, they begin experimenting, and then they find their own thing. Spiritually, that's what we're doing. Religion belongs to that collective state. So when we begin our journey, we're supposed to break away from that, because we are copying, right? And the collective consciousness overall will always be lower. It's focused on survival, maintenance in many ways, and making sure that everybody can survive together and believe the same in all of this. So when you start feeling that flow coming from the inside, from your higher consciousness, you know that you have to find your own thing, just like an artist. You've studied the techniques of how to exist, and now you have to figure out, well, what's my take on it? And then you begin to break away. That process can take many, many lifetimes. And just as a teenager, right, when you want to be your own person and yet you're not, right? You want to be adult and do your own thing, and yet you're living at home with mom and dad, right? It's that phase. It takes time to break away. So when we are in the early stages of awakening, we will slowly identify as ourselves, like we're something else than the collective, but we still belong to it. We still haven't figured out how to walk our own path and how to survive on our own. And in that phase, it gets really messy. Just like being a teenager is very difficult. Spiritually, it's the same thing. So then we try to experiment and figure things out. This is why often I say, like, modern spirituality is basically, a teenage party, right? It's that Home Alone thing without adult supervision, because everybody's just trying to figure things out, and it's not necessarily always productive. When you belong to a tribe, when you are with your family, think as a teenager, when you're with your family and you know how things work, you can then be the perfect child, perfect family member, and you know how to be that person. But out there in the world where you're trying to find your own path, it's messy, and you have to try things out, try things that your family is saying you should never do that. That's not allowed, and you will be drawn to it, right? Spiritually, it's the same thing. So this is like one of the major reasons why alternative people often look like such a mess. Religious people, they stay often within what can be copied, what can be learned, what can be confirmed by others, and then they feel safe. They feel that they're doing the right thing, and they can be very, very productive and happy. When you start figuring out yourself, just like being a teenager, it's messy. It's not always happy, right? It's why there's so much teenage, angst and depression and all that, because it is difficult to figure out who you are on your own. And a lot of people on this planet are now in that stage because it's important. And there are ways to move past that level, and we'll get back to that in a while, but I think we have some questions.
Yep, we have a question from Sara in the audience.
Okay. I was thinking, since religion have practices like prayer and
in religion you have practices like, for example, prayers, and I would like you to touch a bit about the differences between religious rituals and practices like prayer, and also the difference between modern spirituality and spiritual practices like meditation, for example. If you could talk a bit about the difference there.
This is fun because it all depends on the intention. Now, often I would say that religious practices are simply affirmation of belief, meaning that you have a belief, you belong to a group, and that group has placed the ultimate authority up there, right? And then, because we are hierarchical beings, just like when you're in a tribe, your survival depends on, how the chief likes you, like the people on top, because that will give you benefits, right? It's the same thing in the work situation, right? The boss is over you, has more power, and you will be drawn to trying to please that boss because that will give you benefits. You will be able to climb that ladder, having more income, having a better position, all of that, right? So, when we then have created God as the ultimate boss, because we are hierarchical, because that has always helped us survive. Now, a hierarchy and the rules of the hierarchy will be based on the value system. So, think of the value system as the rules of the game, and then that determines how far up you can come. So, the idea of God and the rules and all of that will give you a clear kind of roadmap to how to get to the top. And this is also why in religions, when you have religious leaders, you assume that they are the embodiment of the value system. Often they're not, though, but it's the assumption. So, now, affirmation of belief is then using our brains and understanding the value system and how to get to the top, right? How to make God love us and not go to hell, for instance. It means that that will be part of our decision-making process. So when you make a decision, you include that. And then you make the decisions that represent what your God or religion tells you, which then turns that decision into an affirmation of your belief. And that will make you score points. That will make you feel safe and secure in that you're doing the right thing, and then you deserve to survive, and you deserve to gravitate towards the top because you're better than other people, right? So, often when we have religious practices, they fall into that. It's a matter of doing them the right way. It's not necessarily about spiritual growth, right? Because in a religion, there is a strict hierarchy, there is submission, because that is how you can get confirmation. Submission is how you get confirmation. You have to do something in order to get the treat, which is confirmation. And that locks you in. So then you have to follow the rules. You have to do this, you have to do that, all these practices. And then God will see you and judge you. So that is how you get the confirmation, knowing that you've done the right thing. So a practice like prayer can be done to affirm your belief and saying that I'm a good person because I'm doing this. Or it can be used as a technique in order to expand your awareness and connect to the divine. But then you have to free yourself from the affirmational part. Then you have to connect. And then you have to go through a process of spiritual awakening. And this is the difference between the mystery schools in organized religion and the followers of a religion. Often when you go to monasteries and stuff like that, people, they sense a connection with the divine, right? And it's the reason why they're in their religion is because that's the framework they're used to. They grew up with that religion, and then they connect spiritually, and then they assume, oh, it must be this, right? But when they do their spiritual practice, for instance, prayer, it's a process of listening to God, right? When you do it as affirmation of belief, it's more, please see me, please give me things, please make sure that I don't go to hell, or that I'm good enough, and protect these people and kill my enemies. It's more trying to convince God that you're good enough. And because you've done all the things that are required, you are entitled to your treats, because look what I've sacrificed. It's not about spiritual awakening at all, but it can be, right? So when you turn prayer into a process of meditation and listening and surrender, where you simply go into a state where you connect to the God you believe in, because to me it doesn't matter what God you believe in, it's all human belief, but it points in a certain direction, right? If we think of our beliefs in God as simply us wearing glasses, being our own beliefs, it doesn't mean that we're not looking at the sun. It simply means that it will look different because we will be filtering it, but it will still be in that direction. And the more we go into spiritual practices or religious practices with an open heart and with the intention of listening, gradually we will be able to move past our own beliefs. I've seen this in so many mystery schools and people who are taking their religious practices very seriously over time, and they connect. And then they transform their practices because they're actually present, right? So, practices in themselves are therefore not the key to understand the difference. It's your intention and your level of consciousness while engaging in these practices. Prayer has been perverted and corrupted, I think, because it can be a wonderful practice. It can be a practice where you basically place your focus and where you can have a little conversation about what you want to focus on. And then you send that out to the universe or to God, and then you just listen. Because then you can release. Then you can let go and you can surrender, right? Then prayer can be wonderful. And then the difference between that and meditation is not that big, because often when we sit down to meditate, we do the same thing. We focus on where am I? You know, what am I studying at this point? What type of issues or spiritual principles do you want to study? And you kind of think about that and you kind of place that as an intention. And then it's surrender, it's opening up, it's doing all of these things. So in essence, no matter what practice you have, at some point they become similar, right? When you connect to the spiritual reality for real, there are simply different utensils, right? It's like you can eat with chopsticks or a spoon or a fork or whatever. And at some point you understand you're eating the same soup. It doesn't matter. And then you can also experiment and understand that how can I utilize these different approaches to open myself up, right? So at some point, even when we are in the most close-minded religions, we will begin to open up. It's a natural process of evolution, both as a person, but also as a spiritual being.
Yeah, on YouTube, Elizabeth contributes an interesting perspective that her parents are religious, and yet she did not count herself as religious, and she found the spiritual alternative movement quite early and went in with all the gurus and everything that comes with the gurus. And she was told many times that her religious upbringing was no good, and yet she feels as a grown-up that their way, her parents' way of practicing their faith has taught her more than all of the gurus put together, and that really her parents' way of practicing is more compatible with what she has learned from you, IKYA, than her experience in the otherwise alternative spiritual movement.
I find this really interesting because remember that for religious people, again, there are so many ways to be religious. But overall, when we look at people who take their religion seriously, which means they also engage in their practices, when you see the effect, again, they're more happy, they're more productive, they take more responsibility, they're better family members, they take care of their family, they are better presence in their community, which means that they are practicing their faith. Now, part of what's difficult about the modern alternative movement is when you have removed that outer authority. Remember that when you have a God, a religious God, the primitive part about this is that humans, when in a low consciousness, are extremely self-centered. It's about, I have to survive and then my closest ones. Which means that most religions, they operate with conditional love and threat. Do this. This is a high, like God said, like do these things and this is how I display my love. But if you don't, I will punish you forever. Right? And it's like that threat that will make people do good things in the beginning. So, you can also say with kids, often you also need a certain level of threat. Our whole legal system is also based on this. It's all the different punishments you can get if you do what society has decided is unproductive or harmful. Right? It's never about rewarding anyone. It's about punish. Because we're that primitive. And just look at if we were to remove all laws, it would be a matter of seconds before the looting would start. It would be complete havoc within minutes, right? Because humans, for the most part, only behave productively when there is a threat. We are actually that primitive. And just think of yourself. How many things you would do if you could get away with it? Right? It's that. So this is also why religions have always been this guideline, like this is the good stuff and this is the bad. Don't go there. It's the devil. It's like all of that. But it's basically from the understanding that humans are quite primitive. And it's just like when you look at the legal system, because in theory, it should be enough for anyone just to get like a small fine. No, it's not possible, because humans will calculate the punishment versus the gain, right? So one will always have to adjust the punishment so it will prevent people, right? So the punishment has to be greater than the gain, because humans have no sense of ethics, right? They just want to do whatever they want to do. So religion has been there to make humans productive. And this is also why when you then train yourself to not do the bad things and also internalize, because it's bad, I will also disappoint my God. You create this wall or this space. I'm not going there. And over time, your brain will change and you can become a good person. Not under threat now. Now you see the love part, right? It's, for instance, you can also see it with athletes, with musicians, when they have a teacher, a mentor, a trainer. That trainer will yell and punish you and be extremely hard, because that's how you bring out your talent. When that is internalized and that person begins to see themselves as an athlete or a musician, then the coach will change approach. Because then, right, you get it now. And then that person will express themselves through whatever they're doing, and then the coach will just now be loving and nurturing. Humans are like this. So this is also why the threat is necessary for humans. Now, when you remove this, which is when people begin their awakening and then start saying, wow, this is all made up. You know, their gods are made up. Like, all of this is made up. And I need to explore all of it. What happens in humans, unfortunately, when we remove the outer authority and a big authority, we become self-absorbed. It's all about me and my needs and what I need to do, like all of that. So a lot of what you find in the modern spiritual movement is actually quite disgusting when you look at it. There's so many self-absorbed individuals. It's me, my needs, my expression, this or that, with very little concern about anyone else or anything else. And this is what you see then in religion, right? It's realistic about where humans are at and what it actually takes to be a productive, happy human. But you see the result, right? When you do the practices, you get there. The thing is, in spiritual work, you also need to do your practices. And there's, no, I don't just feel like it today because, you know, I'm in my whatever it is. Right. You make yourself God. You make yourself the authority in whatever you feel in any given moment. No. To become a good athlete, you need discipline. To become a musician, you need discipline. If you want to be an artist, you need discipline. If you want to achieve anything in life, you need self-discipline. And that often comes with an outer framework forcing you there. Because there's nothing in you, especially your emotions, that want anything but satisfaction in the moment. To achieve greatness, you need to discipline that. Religion helps people. Setting goals, understanding what is more important, right? Because there will be rules telling them what is more important than themselves and their needs, and they will be trained to discipline their urges to achieve the prize of being the version of human that religion wants them to be, and it works. In spirituality today, this is lacking unless you begin to connect, right? Unless you're already an athlete, unless you're already an artist, right? That you have connected to your path and you begin to understand what it actually means. Because then you go beyond the self. Then you're not self-absorbed anymore. Then you will have a high level of ethics. You will be productive. You will be a good partner in your relationships. You will be able to create a wonderful family. You will be successful in life because you will master the outer success as well as the inner one. You will have less conflict. You will take care of people. You will inspire people. You will be part of your community. All of that. So it's then going from having to be forced into connecting to first yourself as something beyond yourself, and you begin to get it. Right? Most people in modern spirituality, they're not there yet. It takes time, and they've just let go of that kind of power game authority that you find in religion because, okay, I can see through it. But they've not seen how they can grow up, how they can relate to life, and that whole process without the power game. Then it's just the teenager who can look at their parents and go, oh, they're just stupid. They don't understand anything, right? It's that. But still, the teenager cannot go out in life and be successful. He just recognizes that I'm not that. I'm past that. And this is how the world evolves, right? So this is where many alternative people are at. This is why it's so messy. And again, yes, there are a lot of wonderful religious people. And when you look at people who feel that, oh, I'm walking my own path, and when you look at their lives, when you look at the level of self-centeredness, right, how they don't really care about anything, how they're not taking part in their community and all of that, many of them would be better off in religion because that would discipline them. It's not better to leave religion to be free and then you just completely absorb yourself in your ego. That's not better. It's like the teenager who believes that, with the absence of parents, like party time and there's only party and drugs and sex and like nothing else. You can't live like that. You need a job. You need to be productive in the world, right? So it's that. And when you're there, it means you're not ready for life, really. You can't contribute. You're not able to take care of yourself. And then that becomes very destructive. So I think for many people in modern spirituality, they should maybe have a second look when it comes to religion, not necessarily to join a church or join a religion, but can look at the dedication, look at going beyond the self, relating to God, relating to a value system and try to live by it, not just breaking the rules because I'm so free. It's that thing. Right? There are a lot of wonderful things in religion when it comes to disciplining yourself and becoming a better human being. Because to me, spiritual growth should also be reflected in you as a person. Right? You should be more balanced. You should be more loving, more caring, like all of these things. Because why else, right? If the ego is just taking over, it's not a sign of spiritual expansion, right? So I completely agree that dedicated people in religion often display a more responsible and mature approach to how to live your faith and your practices than what we often find in the so-called spiritual community. And I think I often talk about the responsibility we have when we aren't on a spiritual path. We need to get our act together, right? If we're just teenagers having a party, we're not part of the solution, are we? Then we're just a disturbance and the neighbors will be calling the police, right? We should be better than that. And we need to recognize that we have to grow up. That's also part of a free spiritual path, is to kind of find that foundation and become someone who makes a difference in life. And religious people do that to much greater extent than people in spirituality.
All right, we got a question from the audience.
I have a comment about spiritual practices and tools again. So what you're saying is that a structure behind it is a really good idea, and that is also what I experience in myself. I find it much easier to do it when there's a kind of structure behind my spiritual practices, and in our modern day world there is a lot. It's like going to the gym. Do you want to work out with Zumba or whatever you want to work out? And for me, it's, for example, with your spiritual tools, they work very efficiently because there is, even though it's more about my own exploration, it's within a framework that I can use, and I feel that my potential can be. So what I was going to say is about the spiritual tools. It can be a good idea for people who are trying to be more productive. It could be really good to explore this.
I think we all need spiritual practices because by default, humans are still animals. This is what religions have also understood, that if we want to refine ourselves beyond the animal level, we need to discipline it. And we need to first discipline ourselves through forcing ourselves to do things we don't want to do. Because all we want to do as animals is just like satisfy whatever need we have, and that's that. And to work as a greater group. This is also where religions change the dynamic, because just like this is connected to spiritual practices, but we're hardwired to want to help our tribe because we depend on them. We want to help the other ones because without them we would be lost because we are specialized. That's how collaboration has been successful. And you recognize them through the same kind of map, the same way of relating to the world, the same beliefs, the same everything. So we need to be part of the same machine. So we want to help those, and you will give everything to those people, but not the neighbor tribe. Those you can kill, right? So in today's world, the strength of religion is that it creates that tribe. When people of the same faith meet, no matter where they are in the world, there's this instantaneous trust. I can trust you because we have the same value system, we will think the same, we will understand each other. So I will help you. Now, when you look at our modern world, it's a melting pot. Everything in the same place. And we're hardwired to only want to help our tribe. So, when we're exposed to everyone, it's like we are in hostile territory. We're like in all different tribes, and where's my people? So we don't want to help. When we experience ourselves being in hostile territory, we become focused on ourselves and our own needs. I just need to take whatever I can because I expect them to do the same because we do not belong to the same tribe, so why would they help me? So we become today more stressed and more negative towards other people because being generous and being empathetic is only something we're supposed to share with our tribe because that's in our interest. It's not in our interest to feed the neighboring tribe. So we have in our brain a way to identify tribe members, and that's through religion. Because again, when someone has the same belief, we can work together. We will have the same goals. So, when it comes to spiritual practices, we need them in order to lift our level of consciousness because we are tribal, we are hierarchical, and there's no way around it as a human. And today's complexity will not go away. It's not like we will all split up and become different tribes. There are attempts, right? It will not happen. It happens through belonging to different groups. But then on a day-to-day basis, you interact with people then in different tribes, different faiths, different whatever it is, and you'll have to make it work. But you don't want to help them. It's very difficult then to have an open heart, because that is connected to belonging together. And this is, again, why religious people often have more of an open heart. They're kinder, they're more gentle, they're more generous, because they're used to interacting with people who trigger that sense of generosity and empathy. While normal people, they're triggered into the opposite behavior. Right? And this is also what we see in modern spirituality. And it's not good, because humans are not more advanced than this yet. So, spiritual practices, no matter what angle you have, no matter what faith, no matter what spiritual path, yes, we need to practice. And the thing is, the strength with religion, for instance, when you look at the Muslim faith, praying several times a day, or else. That's why people do it. But it works. It's the same thing. If someone held you to gunpoint and said, go to the gym 3 times a day, or else, you will lose everything. You will go to hell for eternity. You would. It's about creating priority of things that are more important than anything else. And the thing is, it transforms you. So when you do the practices, you will at least be in dialogue with your own kind of inner self and whatever you understand as spiritual reality. And also, in some religions, it's important to memorize the Holy Scriptures and all of that, which then also brainwashes you. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It washes your brain and will give you information based on the template of that religion, helping you in becoming more of that individual. Now, when, for instance, as a teacher, I don't operate by gunpoint. And I thought maybe I should, but that is actually what makes it difficult, because you have a choice. In religion, you don't, because one understands that humans cannot deal with choices. When humans are given a choice, they will always choose the most destructive one, because that's the short-sighted, the emotional, the need, like everything that is not connected to a bigger picture, and that will always, over time, have a negative result. It's only at gunpoint that humans are able to make better choices. Because this is stupid. Yes, it is, but humans are animals. So religions operate from thousands and thousands of years of experience with humans and how to make them operate in a more organized, positive way. So I would say, like, when it comes to modern spirituality, having discipline around spiritual practices are even more important. Because you cannot trust your human self. Your human self will always choose something else. And I talk with so many people about this, that they struggle with their spiritual practices, don't know what to do, and this or that, because they're everything else. And in religion, they wouldn't have a choice, because then it would be all over, and God would not love you, and you would be punished, and your whole family would be punished, and so on and so forth. So you would do it. And over time, you would then become a more loving individual, if you did it right. So, since we don't have that threat, we need to connect, we need to understand, like, why we want to develop ourselves. And it cannot be from the ego, right? And this is also a challenge, because when we start working with true spirituality, we also move away from hierarchy. We're supposed to, anyway, and understand that all life is one. So you lose that. There's nothing for the ego to gain. And in modern spirituality, one still tries, right? Ooh, I'm more spiritual. I can have all this knowledge and information, makes me so special. We try to create hierarchies out of that. In true spirituality, we move away from it and focus on oneness and everything being one, and learning how to be part of that. So we don't get that ego kind of nutrients from your practices. So there's little to gain. Now, in religion, you will advance in the eyes of God if you are better than others in your practices, right? So that's a bonus. That helps. But in modern spirituality, we have to connect with why. And the only answer is, just like, when I talk with artists, and sure, this is the same all over the world. The cliche is, don't become an artist unless you absolutely have to, right? Because what you need to do in order to gain a level of success is not worth it necessarily. There has to be something else driving you. And for many, it's simply they don't have a choice. It's in them, and it's taking over them. They just have to. And it's the same answer when it comes to why should we engage in spiritual practices and finding our own journey. It's because it's coming from within. When you've started your spiritual awakening, something will happen in you. And when that is starting to kind of flow through, you don't have a choice. You just know you have to. You know it's there. It's something in you that wants to wake up, that wants to get out, that wants to take over. And you can't stop it, even when you try. So even when you fight with yourself, if you should do your practices or not, you end up, over time, doing them. You end up in spiritual studies, and you begin to grow into them because you can't stop it from happening. Because the spiritual awakening is so different from the human evolution journey. But it is about you as a spiritual being, often like what I call that kind of God particle in you that starts to open up and over time bloom, and it takes over. You will not be successful on a true spiritual path if it comes from the ego. If you're into power games, if you're into proving how spiritual you are, all of that are kid stuff. You will stop, because then you will also turn everything into religion. Because that is part of the kind of hierarchy and the power games and the ego. That belongs to the religious level. You can only go past it when you have also seen through your own ego, when you've seen through why these practices of religion and the ways of thinking, the ways of the ego can only bring you to a certain level. And you've already reached that level, say, I want to move on. Then you can see that when you feed your ego, you're moving backwards. You're slipping, and you're starting to slide down the mountain. So you realize, okay, I have to grow past myself. I have to figure out a way to become one with reality. Right? So all of these practices and everything in the self that wants satisfaction, you just look at it and say, meh, it's boring. Sorry, it's not giving me anything anymore. That's when it begins to take over. Many of you are still fighting your ego, and that's okay. Over time, you will figure it out. But yes, spiritual practices are the quickest way to grow past this. And yes, you have to force yourself. Yes, the ego will scream. But remember, without that outer threat, the ego sees no need for you to do anything that will unfold you spiritually, because that will diminish the ego. This is why religions are great to a certain level, but it will not help you in awakening. So this is, the kind of difficult conflict that many of you are experiencing. But discipline in all possible ways. Choosing the greater image and the greater good, choosing the greater version of yourself, and applying discipline is really important. But it's even more difficult because you don't have that outer threat.
Okay, first on YouTube, Paul asked, if religion didn't promise eternal life as a reward, would people still hold on to it? You're talking more about the sort of punishment or threat angle. Is reward also enough? And are there any other sort of essential elements of the religious framework that make it work, in a sense?
The threat part is more important. Right? When you look at, if you want to win an argument that is heated, what is the go-to? Threats. Right? When we, bring up our kids in a heated moment, threats. Our whole legal system, threats. It's because it works better. So yeah, absolutely. And you have religions and kind of variations of the Christian faith, for instance, where it's not enough to be saved. It's not enough to be Christian, believe in God and doing all those things. This will only be a selected few that will be allowed into the highest part of heaven, or whatever it is, right? So even though you're doing everything, you still may lose. But because of the hierarchy, it simply means that people will work harder. Even though they still may not be allowed into heaven. So the threat part is definitely more important than the reward. But the combination helps the human brain in making productive decisions. And this is also part of why certain religions have become so successful, is simply because they make people successful. Right? It's a way to organize society and organize our lives in a way that will work, and understanding that humans would not be able to do it without those rules, because humans are not ethical beings. We can learn to be ethical at gunpoint. It's only when we begin to wake up spiritually that we start to understand, oh, right, I'm part of an organism. Everything I'm doing, I'm actually doing to myself. I can see that what's happening in me, it has an impact. Like, you begin to see it for real. It's not a belief. You begin to see it, you begin to experience it. And then it makes sense for your own survival to behave more ethically. And you say, all right, because now the game is, how can I expand my level of awareness? And then you have to study natural law. You have to figure out how to be in more harmony, right? And how to live and how to be it in many different ways. So you will then slowly transform into a more balanced, productive human being as a result. And you don't need threats anymore, because at that point, you're self-motivated, right? You connect with life, you connect with oneness or nature, and it's starting to have an effect. And then that takes over. But as I say, like, many people are in this in-between space, and it can be very difficult. But the wild kind of college party part of the modern alternative movement is very unsavory. And I would say, like, if you are there, recognize that you're still driven by your ego, that you're still very hierarchical, that you're still very religious, and that is fine. It's just like, it's fine to be young and to test boundaries and all of that, but also grow out of it.
Got a question from Eli in the audience.
I think you also touched upon it, but I just want to say something about the discipline part and passing the discipline, because discipline can be that you feel that you think, I have to do like this and this and this, and it can feel it's like you have to pull up yourself every time you're doing the exercises or something, and I can both like discipline and also not like it at the same time. But lately, the last months, something has changed. And I think it might, I don't know if it's something to do with what you just said, that now I just do all kind of, I have like, I don't know how many, 10 different practices every day, the same. And what has happened is that I like them. Yeah. It's just that, wow, I'm enjoying myself getting up at 5 o'clock to do this and this and this. And now it has become, it's not forceful at all, and detoxing and doing all the great things for my body, yeah. So I'm trying to like, it just happened by itself. Like,
But
So, yeah.
but I think this is just a great example of what discipline and structure will do, because remember, it will spill over to other things. So when we become a more disciplined human being, it's not just the practices, but it's the fact that we're becoming more disciplined. And then we'll learn that discipline will actually, bring us places. And then we understand, oh, right, there is something here I can use. So disciplined people, this is also why when you see people practicing their religious faith and whatever it is, they become more productive because they're used to, I have to do this. It's not about how I feel. I'm doing it for something greater. It can also be, I need to take care of my family. Right? So I will, work overtime. I will do this or that because I will take that responsibility. It becomes more normal. And being disciplined, the way I see it is, discipline is freedom from being dominated and controlled by your patterns. Your patterns are not necessarily productive. It will not help you achieve anything because all your patterns is simply about assisting your body in not dying. So if we want something more, we have to push ourselves. And discipline will, over time, give results. And when we start to realize, oh, I get results here, it transforms us. And then we feel that, all right, I can create. I'm part of the creation of the universe. And I can do my part. And even religious people do this. You see, for instance, that people of the Muslim faith are often extremely productive as families. Right? It's like every family is like the mafia. I mean that in a good way. That they can organize themselves and because they can share goals and they're used to work and they're used to that discipline. So they're able to then give their short-term needs less attention and more focus on goals, right? Because they have to go through their disciplines, and it's extremely healthy. So when we have spiritual disciplines where we can choose whether or not we do them, right? It becomes indulgent, it's not productive spiritually, because how to go beyond the self is actually going beyond the self and going beyond the needs and the wants and everything that the self has. And when we do that, all of a sudden something else will be kind of switched on, which you also have experienced, right? I'll just touch upon something that is also interesting when it comes to the religious framework, is understanding how this has developed. When you think of our genetic makeup, right, it's very old. Human DNA has not changed for several 100,000 years. It's virtually the same. So how do we then learn? How do we develop? Now, when something becomes part of the DNA, it has been proven and repeated for a very, very long time. For instance, walking on two legs is a cultural phenomenon. It's not genetic. Speaking is also a cultural phenomenon. It's not genetic. So it means when it comes to how we operate, we have the genetic component, which is operating our organs and making everything function. But then we have what it means to be a human. That is cultural. And think of, to create your maps and to function, you need an enormous amount of information. And you need identity. So the identity is how you become this as a being. So the cultural part is extremely important. So you have three components. You have your genetics, you have the culture, which is that enormous pool of experience and memories and history. And then you have your personal experience. Your personal experiences cannot be trusted because you have very limited experience, and you will then turn one experience into an explanation about how the universe works. Right? We all do that. So we need culture. We need history. We need that identity so we can get that guidance. Religion is that. It's all these guidelines and rules and whatnot, and it's been tested. Right? So that becomes the culture in which you're then able to interpret your own experiences and use the history as a backdrop. Think, for instance, of the Jewish faith. I think they're just like very smart as a culture when it comes to this because their faith is their history. Right? It's history, rules, and practices. Then you're Jewish. So it's then your life being mirrored in history. Right? That compensates for what is lacking in our genetics. Get it? So we have genetics, and then we have this layer. And then when it's religion, it's no doubt because it also means that this has higher priority than your own personal experience. You should not trust the personal experience because you may be wrong. You may make the wrong assessment because you have one person, one experience. We have all of this. And these rules have been tested. This is from God, so it's more important than you. So it helps us to trust our own experiences less and to use the collective experience and the rules becoming the kind of the crystallized extract of the collective experiences over time. And then you have like a 3-step model that actually works. So when you remove that middle part, you have your genetics, which is still animal, and then you have your personal experiences. The combination is whatever you make up, whatever you want it to be. And you're less able to navigate, which means you will be more depressed, have more stress. You will be less productive because you don't have the rules. So how should I deal with this? What's the priority? What are the value systems? Right? Because as a human being, it's not in your DNA yet. So think of the culture as the DNA kind of pending. It is that process where the life form, the DNA, and your genetics is still kind of negotiating what should be now part of our collective programming. So we need this level. So when you operate on your own, it means you need a very strong foundation in you. Because if you navigate horizontally, which is the human way, you will not be productive. And this is what many people experience in modern spirituality. When you look at their ability to navigate life, it's just messy. They have no idea what they're doing. And they make up a lot of things because, you know, their inner worlds, and it's just a mess. They lack that culture part, which means you have to get it from within. And that takes discipline. It takes true connection to the higher version of you. Connection to life flow, connection to nature, so you can start seeing the bigger picture. You can start experiencing it, and that will then be much more efficient than culture, because culture is limited. When you're able to connect with nature the same way, you have everything. Because you have natural laws, right? You have everything there, but you need then to experiment and interact in order to understand, and then that becomes your sounding board. When you have an experience, you can also see how natural laws operate, and you can see spiritual laws and all of that, and you start getting it. And that will then become how you navigate. But going from the cultural kind of sounding board to nature, that takes time. And most people in modern spirituality, they have no idea how to navigate. Again, just look at their lives, right? Look at how self-absorbed we often are in modern spirituality. We should focus on service. We should focus on giving back, right? We should ideally be better at being human and being successful more than religious people. And this is where you will get when you understand how to work with nature. But again, when you have set yourself free from culture and you're still not truly connected to life, you will be self-absorbed. You will make up all sorts of belief systems and stuff that you think will bring you somewhere, but really won't. Back to spiritual practices, and also finding spiritual teachers that can teach you how to navigate for real. Because often when you're in that, college kid just want to party, you will gravitate towards people who knows how to organize parties. They will be still the same thing, and that's fine. But I think many of you've kind of been there, done that, and you may want something else. Discipline, spiritual practices, and also, going beyond the self in every way possible. And it's like, learn from religious people. Look at what they do. Look at how they live their lives. And use that as a template. Doesn't mean that you have to do it that way, but look at the level of productive choices, taking responsibility, and being someone that can make an impact. Just being irresponsible and weird does not mean you have a high level of consciousness, right? Any individual reaching a higher level of consciousness will have an enormous sense of responsibility, will have a complete understanding of their presence and their impact, and how they should use that to stimulate the maximum growth and healing in others, not just in people, but in all levels of life. And one will make one's decisions based on the consequences in a bigger picture. And that will always have priority over one's own personal needs. It doesn't happen by itself. Is that maybe many people in modern spirituality would be better off in religion if we give them a framework and a level of purpose and discipline. Again, back to that cultural part, because they haven't gotten it yet. So we need also to explore, how do we function without religion? What does it actually take? I'll get back to that, but do we have any questions?
We don't have any more questions, but I'm sitting here with this, I'm having this like a little bit of mathematical perspective at least in my mind, of that sort of necessary versus sufficient conditions of enlightenment or spiritual growth. And it sounds to me, and I'm looking for you to correct me if I'm off, but it sounds to me that intention and discipline are really key. And yet neither of them is sufficient in themselves, because I can have high intention, say I'm sitting and meditating all the time with high intention, but I'm sloppy and undisciplined in life and I'm completely unaware of other people and things. Or on the other hand, I can be super disciplined, for example, be praying every day, but praying to rules and all of that kind of stuff. So it seems like if you only have one, you're not going to get there. You have to have both. That was kind of my reflection.
And there is a third element to that. All religions offer clear rules on how to live. And often those rules will discipline your choices, because there will be things you want to do and you can't do them. that in itself is good. It helps it go beyond the self. And it also brings your practices into life. Right? This is, when you see religious people and they don't follow their life rules in that religion, that's when they lose it. Right? People who practice the rules of life, they have a dedication, they have the love, because they go the extra mile. People who identify with a religion and they believe in it, but they don't live it, it doesn't work at all. So for me, it's then understanding what values are we living by. What are the kind of spiritual principles you identify with? How do you kind of see your path? What you live by, what you live for? And then try to crystallize that and understand, what is that? What are my values? And then create some basic life rules to help you navigate, because the human brain is not very advanced. It needs help. So you need to understand, what do you regard as spiritual, more productive or spiritually purposeful, and understand it, and then understand, how do I interpret this interaction? How should this influence my choices? Because this is where you get your ethics from. This is where you get a kind of moral behavior. Right? To me, it's always about seeing the consciousness and the value system and the beliefs and thoughts and emotions and actions and habits and natural behaviors being the same. That's the integrity. That's where the ethics are. So you need to understand that. And then you will make better choices. But you will make it based on your understanding of how the world works and what you want to achieve. You can always break down any goal to a recipe. And it's for you to understand, what's your recipe and what the fuck are you baking, right? And getting to know that, because again, without that religious framework and threat, you have to bring yourself forward. And I always emphasize what we live for this reason, that we try to display the values we represent, the principles, and also like how we identify with being a kind of a spiritual journeyer, walking a spiritual path. What does that mean? How is that visible? We should be better. It should show. And then we need to become aware, like, what type of choice will I make in this situation? What types of choices will reflect my value system? And that will be productive. So we need to go all the way. And to me also, there's so much of this in modern spirituality where you can see people claiming to be in a high level of consciousness, and then they behave like assholes, not just once, but repeatedly and quite often. And it's that, it's our consciousness will be displayed through what we consistently and repeatedly do. So we also need to practice that. And this is what you get in religion, because then you have the rules, but you need to make your own, and from a higher perspective. But back to how to do this without religion, I think one thing that is really important is having a sense of responsibility. And it's also for you now to recognize if you have actually arrived at this point. responsibility is something you want to have. It's not about blame. It's seeing that responsibility is a good thing, because then I can be in charge. I can actually express. I can actually have a positive impact. Because if you sense that you vibrate higher, that you have access to something of a higher quality, then you want responsibility so that you may have that impact on the world. Right? So when we begin to wake up, we seek responsibility. We want it because we understand that is the same thing as freedom. So that is one thing you will notice in yourself. And back to discipline that we've talked about, it's where we are free from our patterns. And it's all these practices and things we do in different ways in order to behave beyond our genetic programmings. We already talked about spiritual practices, that is something you were drawn to, understanding that, yeah, it doesn't just come by itself. I also need to practice in order to build myself beyond my human level of consciousness. A clear value system, a sense of ethics, I said that is also something we're drawn to. We understand that I have to be consistent on all levels. If not, it's not credible. And when we look at the kind of moral decay of our society, it's because most people cannot operate without religion. We have a lot of freedom, but no responsibility. And just, if you look at the Western world, there are a lot of interesting things going on, but you can also see that there is a moral decay. And it's because of lack of religion. So, not being driven by needs, as we talked about, that's also something you will recognize, that you are drawn to something greater than yourself. You want purpose. You are drawn to purpose. And you understand that often you will have to choose between self-interest and something greater. And something inside of you are just pulling you towards the greater part, being greater, taking part in something greater, and you have a thirst for it. It's difficult to explain, but if you experience it this way, it's because you are in a process of awakening. One thing that also comes with a budding spiritual awakening is the respect for other people and their paths. You don't have to be right anymore. That is a fundamental change that everybody in a spiritual awakening will experience, is that not necessarily all of a sudden. For some people, it's all of a sudden. They realize that, oh, I respect everybody. I can see what other people are doing, and I can see, well, good for them. I'm walking my path. I want my freedom, and therefore I need to want them to have their freedom as well. I cannot judge them. I should not have any opinion on what they're doing or not doing, because that belongs to them. So you're not provoked by other people's beliefs or practices, no matter what it is, because you realize that, well, that's what they need. And the next step, of course, is love. That you begin to understand, that you begin to connect with love in a greater way. Not just from desire and being in love and that type of very human love. You begin to have experiences of love that is not human. That is unconditional. It's basically love for no reason whatsoever. You can have a sense of a deep love for life. And you can experience a divine love coming through. So you go beyond human love. Human love will still be there, but you expand. And when you're in the process of awakening, you will have these types of experiences, and they become a part of you. One thing that is also very important is curiosity and exploration. Because you're trying to find and walk your own path, you need to be curious. Remember that religion is having all the answers so the brain can relax. There's nothing more to know, right? And in Islam, for instance, Allah says that this is the final version. This is my final word. That is very comforting, because then you have all the answers. There's nothing to explore because you have all the answers. Humans love that. This is also why it's growing and will become the biggest religion in the world, as people are getting more confused because of all the changes. It's very comforting when you have a religion saying there is nothing more. This is the final version. You never have to learn anything else. So that's very attractive. So when we wake up spiritually, it's the opposite. Questioning everything from the perspective of knowing that whatever I experience, whatever I think I know, that's not a full version. So we do the opposite of religion. Again, in religion, you have affirmation of belief. Basically, you have this belief and that's a fact to you. And then you try to prove to God and yourself that, yes, this is how it is. It is confirmation bias on acid. It's just like, it's just, from a rational perspective, it's insane. From a spiritual perspective, it is insane. But it belongs to that level of consciousness where this is actually productive. Because you can't take the exploration. You can't take waking up every day and the world is different. And where you have to challenge yourself and your belief and your practice, like everything, continuously, because this is what you do when you're on a spiritual path. You transform and you transform and you transform and you never stop. So it's the opposite of what you find in religion. So we need that curiosity. And also you need the ability to learn from your experiences, placing it in a kind of greater image, exploring it from different positions, and always relating to there being more than you can possibly comprehend, right? This is also why it's important to not having to be right. You're past that level. You don't have to know. You could just sense that you are on this path of exploration and you learn and you grow and you can see it. But you never need the final anything because you know that it doesn't exist. So that constant kind of challenging everything every day, that is also part of a spiritual path and the process of awakening. We had another question, I think.
Yep, we've got a question in the audience.
Yeah, back to what this started with, mentioning the conflict in the Middle East with Palestine and Israel. And there's a pattern where if one side does something bad, which happened recently, atrocities, killing, you name it, there's a reaction back that is so hard that don't forget this, and they think that will help. And by all the other things you've said, this kind of tit for tat and worse and back and forth is not very mature. So I'm in on a world meditation later on tonight that goes for this and other conflicts to pray for it. But what can we do when we care about the human values and we see atrocities happening and what some might call genocide, and the world doesn't seem to handle it at all? There's no grandfather who has the compassion, has the care and the power at the same time. It seems the international organization, the UN, are too weak and don't have the power, and those who have the power don't want to use it in the right direction or to stop anything. So how do we relate as human beings who feel we have ethics and have responsibility and have structure and this within, but at the same time we are at a loss over what the world is up to these days. So can you help us navigate.
Sure. Number one, understand that you have no right to change other people or their path. And when these things happen, it's because it's necessary. It belongs to that level of consciousness. And everybody have the right to experience their own karma and their own level of consciousness. And that's what's happening. Remember, when we incarnate with a certain type of karma and a curriculum. That's why we choose this planet and this life form and specific cultures and families and all of that, because it represents our exact level of evolution. And often, to grow, we need to be confronted, we need to fight. So we incarnate with others that are also there, and then we fight it out, and it's the only way. So there's nothing wrong with it, because the premise of what you're saying is that there is something wrong with it, that ideally it shouldn't happen. Ideally it should, because this is how they figure out their own karma. We need to, like, as I said before, we learn in the healing phase. We can't heal unless there's injury. So first we are destructive, and then we learn how to rebuild. We learn how to heal. We'll learn to be smarter. So when there's a higher level of kind of karmic work on this planet, this happens. Everybody, we're all kind of self-learning. Remember, beyond this life form, beyond the belief systems, beyond cultures, we're spiritual beings. And all we care about is how we can work out our karma as efficiently as possible. And our different types of karma will be on kind of different levels of consciousness depending on how much we've grown in a certain area, and then other areas we're not as advanced. So when things express, it's because of the collective consciousness and the individual consciousness of those taking part in that theater production. And it's just matter. If a human lives or dies of this, it's just part of how we study ourselves. We go through unlimited amounts of lifetimes. We're talking billions and billions. So whenever we go through something, it's because that's the ideal way for us to be confronted and experience our own karma, an exact point of evolution in the mirror. And because when we're confronted with our own karma, the self will always be in denial, and we will believe it's the world, so we attack. And often the mirror will be on the same level, so it's just this exchange. So where this planet is at, for this life form to move to a level, we often say it's one people and one world, all of this old karma will have to be worked out. And that will happen through conflict. It's the only way, because humans are not more advanced than that. You cannot help someone into a higher level of consciousness because it's evolution. Right? Basically, to put this way, you cannot teach a monkey quantum physics. No matter how much you do, how much love you give, it will not happen. That monkey will have to go through 2 million years of evolution first. You cannot impact someone's exact point of evolution. You can only encourage and support and nurture that process, but then the karma is still there. The karma will still have to be worked out. And it's important also, when we want to be part of lifting the planet, that we don't do it for like aesthetic reasons. But I mean, I don't like looking at this. This is uncomfortable to me, so therefore I want to change it. Often when we are in service, we will make things worse. If that's what it takes to release the karma more efficiently, we can see, yeah, they can deal with it. it's often better to make it worse, because then they can go through the destructive phase faster. And then one can be there for the healing, but it's still letting nature do what it does and never having this aesthetic reason, because often the motivation behind wanting to heal or heal somebody is that I am uncomfortable watching this, so therefore I should change it because my version is better, because it feels good to me, so it has to be true. That's not spiritual work. That's imperialism. Right? So it's very important, often when people are involved with this type of work, they feel better than us, they feel they have the right, and they do not understand even the most basic thing about why we incarnate or how karma actually works. So, the productive focus to have when we want to be part of healing or meditation groups for the planets is never to focus on what is happening, because that is simply what has to be expressed based on everything present. It's the consequence. It's not the reason. It's not, you know, the reason behind it all. It's more trying to be a tuning fork. I thought, what values do you represent? Not saying that they should this or that. It's none of your business, but you can vibrate what you vibrate, your insight, your level of consciousness, and offer that as a mirror. But that will often make things worse. The clearer mirror will make others see themselves more clearly. You can think that, you know, if you have bad eyesight, you know, I have no wrinkles, right? And as the mirror gets clearer, you can see each line, each wrinkle, each pore. And that is what's happening when you are a clear mirror. Nobody's grateful for that, and often it will increase the aggression. Because the reason why we have conflict is because people do not recognize their own karma to start with. So it's being mirrored, and then they engage because they are in denial. So this is how it works for all of us. But sometimes these processes are also collective, because it's like if there are a lot of people in the exact same kind of spot in a specific type of karma, put them on a bus. And then you will have a collective expression of that thing, right? So then there will be collective expression and aggression, and all of that is wonderful. They have to go through what they need to go through in order to learn and heal. And on this planet now, there will be more and more conflict on so many different levels, because it's how we can work out all these differences. We have been pretending that there aren't any differences because, number one, we've had the Western narrative holding the world hostage. And they've, well, we all agree this is, you know, because the West has been the default, and now the rest of the world is starting to develop, meaning that, yeah, there are more perspectives, more narratives, and then all of that will have to be worked out. And there's nothing one can do to stop it, because, and that's a good thing, because it should not be stopped, because it will have to be worked out. It's how humans also will become smarter and better. So everything happening in the world is absolutely necessary, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't happen. You cannot change someone's actual level of evolution, also spiritually, right? Then it's a matter of going through whatever is necessary in order to unfold. So this is what we're seeing on this planet, both when it comes to manifestation, but also spiritually. There's no way around it. And when we are in a process of spiritual awakening, when we are in a spiritual path, we have responsibility to give space, to embrace it, to love it. It's the same thing when we see kids, developing social skills and social intelligence. They're fighting, they're in different, conflicts, and they do this and that, and they show aggression, they're, all of that. As adults, we know, they have to go through this. We can support them, we can, dry their tears, and we can, put a Band-Aid on, but we know that they have to figure it out, right? So we love them, and we can feel what they are feeling, but we also know they will not develop their social skills unless they go through this. And you see this with parents who are overprotective. Their kids become, again, self-absorbed and not very good people. So it's the same thing. We are, as a planet, moving into a more advanced level. All of this will have to be worked out. It will be extremely violent, extremely difficult, and we're just in the beginning of it. So it's important to give up any aesthetic reasons to help. Any, I'm spiritual and I know what I'm doing. Understand that everything has already been planned. From a spiritual perspective, it's under management. And we have to let it happen. And what you can do is to love it, embrace it, nurture it, and show the next step. Represent the next level. But then you have to do it in your own life. You can't just talk about it. Look at your life. Are you the template for the new world? When you look at your life, could one do copy and paste? And if that were to be done, would we then be on a higher level? Because this is really the job. To have any credibility, we need to live it first. Also, when nobody's looking. And be complete, be consistent. Right? Just pointing and say, this should change and I know better. Nature is not fooled because it's all about vibration. It's all about information. It's about consciousness. You can't fake it. You can convince other people, but you can't fake it. So we all have to do the work in ourselves. We have to be true. We have to be real. We have to practice. We have to be disciplined. If we want to lift the world, lift yourself first. Then you can pull others up. But not before. So we have this responsibility to our own path, to our own unfoldment, and to use and to reach all our own potentials. To do the spiritual work and to incarnate as much as we can of our own higher consciousness and make it productive for the world. Otherwise, we're just strange. So when we do that, and we feel, yes, we're creating a kind of affluence of presence and love, then we're in a position. Because then we embody where this planet is heading. Right? Then we become a tuning fork that the world and other people can use to navigate so they can find their path, so they can work out their own karma more efficiently. This is what the job always is. Right? And in the journey of awakening, this is more challenging. Because people make up whatever in modern spirituality and think it's so great and it's mostly ego fluff. Try to go beyond that. It's also okay if you can't, but when you recognize that you are in a process of awakening, Do the work for real. Let the divine love take over. And if we think of the divine love or the love from God or whatever you want to call it, it does not judge. It simply loves. The fastest way for someone to grow and to deal with one's karma and to heal is by loving them without any other intention than just loving. Because that is the flow that contains the full spectrum. It can nurture anything, it can heal anything, but it does not dictate how. So growing beyond religion is very challenging. It can only happen for real when we are in a process of awakening. And this is where we all need to aim. And we need to look at, if we experience ourselves being in this in-between state, try to look at where you're aiming. Try to build practices and understand how to get there and then be dedicated to it. Create life rules. Live by them. Display them. Right? Be the template. Be a tuning fork for everyone. And then more people will grow out of religion and find their own path. Because that is also the spiritual evolution of humans. And it will take an enormous amount of individuals having found their own true spiritual path and having achieved results and true spiritual awareness to create kind of a tailgate or a gravitational pull for everyone. So this is how you truly lift the planet. And this is the true spiritual work.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us this evening for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective. And again, truly a unique program in the world, bringing you that practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. We look forward to being with you again next Monday at 19 o'clock or 7 p.m. Oslo time for IKYA Live. And be sure to join us then, as well as share tonight's episode with any fellow seekers that may benefit from the discussion we've had. And again, follow us on social media, IKYA.official at Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and here on YouTube. So until next time, we'll see you at IKYA Live.